Oh, fantastic. Hi, everybody. I learned about the Zapatistas via Zach de la Roca, who was very involved in the movement and was we were all inspired by the Zapatista uprising. I know that he spent a good deal of time with them, sort of like volunteering in the jungles down there and expressing, sort of the solidarity of a lot of us from the US who support their cause. The idea of a righteous indigenous peoples movement for justice is one which is very inspirational to us. And as a committed internationalist myself, realizing that there are no borders, when it comes to freedom, no borders when it comes to justice, no borders when it comes to solidarity, no borders when it comes to standing up for each other, and having uh, the acknowledging that history is not something that happens. History is something that we make, and that it's something that we can make together by standing up for one another. And whether it's via the vocation of music or journalism or the plumbers union or whatever, having the courage to not leave behind your ideas and your convictions in your vocation. And I believe that that is one of the main links between, sort of myself and the band and the Zapatistas and the support. I will tell you, there's a funny and sort of inspiring story about the Zapatistas. When Rage Against the Machine played in Mexico City for the first time ever in, uh, I'm not sure what year it was, but we were warned by the government authorities that we should not mention the Zapatistas at the concert, despite the fact that there are references in the lyrics that no explicit mentions of the Zapatistas at the concert. And there's thousands and thousands of people in this room, and when the concert begins, and they said it 100 times, like, you can't do it and you'll be dragged off to jail. And so we had this big screen in front of the stage, and then a film came on, and it was like a film of the jungle, and out of the jungle rode Subcomandante Marcos to introduce the band. And people lost their minds, and the show was off to a good start. So anyway. I became a friend. Roger Waters is unique among my friends, as he's the only famous person I've ever just called up, like cold called, and said, "Would you like to have dinner?" like I'm not that's not what I do. But I was so inspired by the Wall tour, that I just want, and I'm a big fan of him as a lyricist, as an artist, and as an activist. And we went to dinner, and over a couple of bottles of wine, we became friends. And then he invited me to perform. He does a yearly show to support wounded veterans, and he asked me to play with him, and that's when we sort of became more acquainted. But yes, we, in preparation for that show, we did spend some good time together, where we discussed, sort of global issues, including Latin America, and how it's important for us as, northern hemisphere artists to never relinquish a focus on sort of the internationalism that we feel, and that our music connects, in Latin America. And as fighters for justice and fighters for human rights, that always has to be, I think, at the forefront, and never just sort of prioritize, you know like northern hemisphere issues, while we do have to do the fighting in our backyard. I think it's the hope for humanity is a recognition that we're all part of the same planet, and that your problems are my problems, and my problems are your problems, and that there should be no division by people who are struggling together for a more just and a more decent and a more peaceful planet. Roger's a fantastic cook. He's a chef. He's like a chef. I didn't know that. Like, we're sitting around, and first of all, it's crazy to like sit around Roger Waters' house, because he like plays the piano, and he's Roger Waters. He's playing the piano. But then he makes a delicious clam linguine. Yeah, it was a very moving experience. I was familiar with the Mothers of the Disappeared, before, but to be able to sort of see and be a part of their march, and to hear the stories of the, you know, people who had lost kids, and of the kids who were like kidnapped by the fascists and raised, like just the horrible stories that you know, that the United States was complicit in, you know, and like living here, like we live in the belly of the beast. And it was a reminder, not just that we have to express our empathy and our solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Latin America, but we have to fight twice as hard here against the empire that helps to bolster these fascist dictatorships then and now. First of all, I mean, my country is so messed up in how science and medicine has become politicized that it's just so outrageous. It's like hearkening back to superstitious pre-enlightenment times. But it's the you know, it's one of the another one of the global crimes of capitalism, that the idea that medicine, which could literally be saving hundreds of thousands of lives, is hoarded in the name of profit. Like it's like it underlines the fact that the people that own and control the world don't deserve to. I mean, there's a million different examples, but this one is crystal clear that people who want and need the vaccination to help save themselves and their grandmothers are denied it because these huge pharmaceutical corporations find more profit in distributing it in Britain and Chicago. You know what I mean? It's just one more piece of evidence that the system that rules us is absolutely bereft of soul and needs to be dramatically revamped or overturned. I think it's because it's the same phenomenon in the United States with Trump, and in Britain, and in some European countries, where it's evidence of the failure of the capitalist neoliberal policies that have left behind large sections of the working class, and it's enriched the top few, and there's a feeling, an accurate feeling, that the institutions as they've been run do not represent and cannot fulfill the needs of the people. That's real. I come from a small town. I come from Trump country. Like, I come from a place that's just all Trump all the time. And the people there are not bad people, but they've been dicked around by Clinton and by Obama and by Bush and by this, that, and the other. So that when a grifter, you know, grifter, when like a charlatan, like a trickster, like when a demagogue, someone comes along and promises easy answers. Like, the problem is not this system. The problem is Mexicans. The problem is not the system. The problem is Muslims. It's a very, very easy solution for people to grab onto, and a strong father figure who's going to keep out the unwashed brown people. Like, it's a simple message. It's much more complicated to say there's a global system of capitalism and this is how it works, and even though you have two political parties here, they both serve the same oligarchical interest. Like, that's a much harder sell than the Mexicans are the problem. And that's why I think that these right-wing politicians have gotten such traction, is that divide and rule, racism, are easy cards to play to increase personal power and push forward a fascistic agenda. Yeah, well, I think that there's the micro and there's the macro. You know, in my case, my mom, when I was 5 years old, told me about a person named Malcolm X, who said that it's your responsibility to stand up to racism wherever you see it, whether you're 5 years old or whether you're 50 years old or whether you're 95 years old. And so I had to stand up for myself in this all-white daycare, and got into a fight, and the fight eventually led to the bully, you know, being disciplined in a way. And I think much is the same in the macro, is that we have to stand together and be determined to like, that's how the world changes. Like, whenever the world changes in progressive, radical, or even revolutionary ways, it's changed by people that are no different from anyone listening to this. There's no sort of magical amount of intelligence or influence or power or creativity that people have who change the world. It's just you. It's really just you, you know, and that's how it's always happened. And so by applying, people standing up and not being willing to take it anymore, and that can have a lot of different applications in different situations. But the first thing you must realize is that you are an agent of change. Well, I think that it's no surprise because I think that is the function of the police. It's like I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that the police are here to like serve us and protect us. The police are here to maintain a particular order that in my country is revolves around white supremacy and preserving power. And I'm not familiar with all of the details of Argentinian politics, but police around the globe tend to fulfill the same function, which is keeping their boot. Like it sends a strong message when you can murder black people with impunity. That's a strong message. Like that's a and when you feel the biggest backlash, like whenever there's someone attacks a police officer, or whether the anti-fascists fight back against police, like you'd think it was the end of the world. Like the idea that there's something that is ingrained in sort of our, at least in the United States, that the only legitimate use of force is in the hands of those in uniform. And when we take back the use of force and say, like there's that famous saying, like people should not be afraid of their governments, governments should be afraid of their people, that's when we become a real threat to them. During lockdown, I recorded a lot of music, and I have a studio, but I don't know how to use it. So I had to record all of the guitars into the voice memo of my phone. So I would record the guitars into my phone and then send them to producers and other artists. And I have 2 records out now called the Atlas Underground Fire and the Atlas Underground Flood. And those are really like the culmination of these kind of global collaborations, from Palestinian DJ Sama Abdul Hadi to Bruce Springsteen, from Swedish socialist Refused to country and western star Chris Stapleton, to Bring Me the Horizon, whose singers that lives in Brazil. There's a lot of collaborations on this record that was a way to keep me sane during a time where there was a lot of insanity. Yeah, well, those are 2 important questions. One is, I've always self-identified as an activist and as a musician. So for me, it was never like I'm a musician and then I have to see where activism fits into it. My heroes were the Black Panthers and Che Guevara and the Weather Underground and Malcolm X. So like that was always a part of my DNA, and I wasn't gonna lose that to try to get a song on the radio, And yeah, there's plenty of, in some ways you alienate a great many potential fans by not just the content of the songs, but by speaking out on social media. And I have a simple 2-word message for them: fuck them. Like, who cares? Like I'm not making, if you make music that everyone can agree on, it's probably pretty shitty music. That's the way I look at it. Yeah. And then secondly, what you say to people who like say that keep politics out of music, I believe that all art, all music is political. Escapist pop music certainly is a part, helps create a culture of, helps embolden a culture of escapism, or pushes misogynist tropes or things like that, all of which are very, very political things. And to say that when you pick up your guitar that you put down your right to free speech seems outrageous to me. I'm not about to do that anytime soon, so don't worry. First of all, in order for political music to be compelling, the music has to be kick ass. I mean, it has to be like, no one wants to hear you deliver a Noam Chomsky lecture over a beat. Like it's got to be compelling. But when it is compelling, that does an interesting thing. It casts a wide net. So you'll be, on the one hand, preaching to the converted, people who are like, I see eye to eye, that's my message. Then you'll be exposing a great many people who come for the music, but are introduced to a different set of ideas than in other music that sounds like that. Then there's a subsection of people that hate what you stand for and are tune it out and just sort of, throw elbows in the mosh pit. And all three of those things are prevalent in my audience through the years. Yeah, I think the link between art and political movements is crucial. In my country, there has never been a successful social movement that didn't have a great soundtrack. From like the union movements of the early 20th century to the civil rights movement to the anti-war movements to the anti-globalization movements, that music predates written language, and there's something deep in our kind of core that responds to a tribal setting where there's a beat and truths are spoken. Like that's something that is really like ingrained in us. And I feel, in the hundreds and hundreds of activist and charity shows that I've played, that music can really put wind in the sails of people who are doing the people who are doing the real work. Well, I play guitar, you know what I'm saying? I play guitar in a band, and that music can be inspiring, but people feel that sort of connection, and it provides a solidarity. Anyone who hears this, there's this famous saying by Joe Hill, who was a labor organizer in the early 20th century. It was like, a pamphlet or a book is only read once. A song is repeated over and over and over again and gets into your heart. Also, music, like fans in Argentina and Chicago and Berlin are all singing the same song, are all hearing the same message, are all connected and recognizing that they're not alone in their beliefs. I think that's very, very important too, because where I grew up in a very conservative town, I thought me and my mom, I thought we were the only ones that thought this way, until I discovered Public Enemy, until I discovered The Clash, and realized there was an entire set of ideas that resonated as true, that were believed by a great many people, that was introduced to me by songs. And I think that can be a very encouraging thing going into the future. Yeah, well, I mean, unfortunately, I haven't played a show in about 2 years, so I miss it very much. But I do remember it. I do remember back into the past when that happened. Yeah, I mean, there's really no greater feeling, especially when you make music. There's music that people like, there's music that people love, and then there's music that people believe in. And that is a very, because I know for me that's a deeply meaningful thing, and that connection and that community that can be forged by music can have ramifications that go well beyond the mosh pit. The mosh pit that starts in the arena can become a mosh pit in your mind that you take into the world. And every day, like, I run into people, whether it's Rage Against the Machine or the Night Watchman or Audio Slave or whatever, like different music from that say like, I became a public defender and a lawyer because of this. I became an anarchist because of this. I became a community organizer because of this. And it lights fires that you'll never know. When you look out into that, whether it's a club show, an acoustic club show, or a mosh pit with like 50,000 people, you just never know who out there are going to be the change makers, in the next generation. Thank you for the interview, and two, for the good work that you do in the communities where you work. And also a broader thanks to all of the friends, fans, and comrades in Argentina. I haven't been there as much as I've been there a few times, but I haven't been there as much as I would have liked through the years. And I hope to get back, because some of my favorite shows that I've ever played have been in Argentina, and the people there have been great, and the experiences there have been very deeply meaningful too. So I look forward to returning to Argentina, hopefully in the not too distant future. So, well, thanks very much. Gracias, and take care.